What is most critical, hand or eye dominance for archery? This is the exact question I'm attempting to answer. Because I'm right-handed, but I'm left-eye dominant. Part one of this was to get my own experience, to be my own guinea pig, to test it out myself. To do this, I switched from my non-dominant eye and dominant hand to my dominant eye and non-dominant hand for 1,000 shots. I compared the beginning of the test to the end of the test to measure my improvement, as well as kind of comparing the end of my left-handed test to how my right hand does. And it went like this. I can't remember the last time I shot a bow left-handed, so let's find my starting point and take 5 shots into a target from 15 yards. A little awkward. This is shot 1, and then the other 4 are right here. I'm at 995 shots, so here is the last 5 of the 1,000. Hey, not a bad group. I have shot better 5-shot groups here in the past 300 shots, but this is not a bad one here. And I was surprised to find out that I like shooting with my left hand better than shooting with my right. I mean, this makes no sense. I've been shooting right-handed for my entire life. And in less than 2 weeks, my left hand is already shooting better than my right? Why? Most of us would ask an archery coach, what's more important, hand dominance or eye dominance? But I want to take a little bit of a different approach. What if we go to an expert on eyes and see their opinion, see what they think about this scenario? An eye doctor helping out an archery channel. I guess it's worth a shot. Dear Dr. Eye Guy. So I reached out to an eye doctor who has experience with helping archers. He went above and beyond for me. He did even more research than he already knows. He revisited it. He also asked his colleagues and other doctors what they thought about 3 questions that I asked. So with his expertise today, I think there is a lot to be learned from a really unique perspective that could benefit so many people. So the rest of the video will go like this. First, we're gonna ask Dr. Gman 3 questions. Then I'll present you actionable steps from Kramer Ammons. Everything I've gathered from my test and experience in all of these conversations, and how I think we should apply them to archery, whether it's for ourselves or people we're helping. The first one's an impossible question, but I asked him before my 1,000-shot test, what do you think would happen if I do this test? I figured he wouldn't even attempt to answer the question, but he gave a guess, and this was his guess of what my experience would be on the 1,000-shot test.
Now, this is obviously a tricky question because there are so many different factors. Definitely depends on the person. I'm predicting here. From what I can gather is that you did mention that you are somewhat ambidextrous. You're able to kind of play sports with both hands, but you are pretty strongly left-eye dominant. And so if I had to predict, obviously at first, I would guess that things are going to feel weird, muscles are going to be weird.
A little awkward.
You're going to have to kind of build up that technique a little bit. You might have a little bit of shaking going on.
Well, this is a little odd. I notice I'm shaking a ton, and it doesn't feel bad, but it just feels awkward shooting left-handed.
But after you kind of get through a few shots, maybe 100, 200, 300 shots, my guess is things are going to start to feel more natural.
I'm 200 shots in, and I think I'm already better than my right hand of 20 years.
Eye dominance is pretty hardwired into the body. Now, people can train different eye dominance, meaning they can train their other eye to switch over, but it's kind of rare and it's really hard to do. So my guess would be is that it's going to be easier for you to use your dominant eye and train your hand dominance, or train to pull back with your left hand. Things will start to feel more natural. Things will feel like you're aiming right, or that you can actually see the arrow, the line of the arrow shooting into the target.
When I shoot right-handed, I'm not actually looking down the arrow, but my left eye is crossing paths with the arrow. To remedy this problem, I just have to close my left eye completely. It's manageable, but it's never felt pure.
Maybe you can actually acquire the picture a little bit faster, or maybe you'll be able to actually start shooting with both eyes open, or maybe you're already doing that when you're aiming. I don't know. But usually when people start aiming or sighting with their dominant eye, they're able to kind of keep both eyes open, maybe judge depth a little bit better.
Oh, and one more thing, watch this. Watch my eyes. The arrow went exactly where I was looking. Like I didn't have to close an eye.
That's my guess. I could be completely wrong. Now, I did ask other doctors what they thought. They also leaned towards probably doing better if you're able to train looking through your dominant eye and then train your muscles to kind of go with your eye dominance. Now, one doctor did say that he is kind of the same way that you are, that he has a dominant left eye and he shoots with his right hand. This is pistol shooting, shoots with his right hand and aims with his right eye. And he's tried kind of switching over and he couldn't do it. So he's thinking that maybe he's like more strongly, right hand dominant. So I think it really depends on the person. But the overall consensus would be, I think you're going to, at the end, feel a little bit better. We'll see on the accuracy and how you're doing. Probably comes up to technique and, that muscle memory. But I'm guessing things will feel better.
I asked Dr. Gman an impossible question. I asked him to predict the future. And what did he do? He predicted the future. When I asked him those questions, I was still doing the test. He was filming at the same time I was filming. I had no clue what he was going to say because I didn't get his footage until I finished that last video. And he had no clue what my experience was because I was still in the middle of the test. It's just crazy to me that he's that dead on to my experience. Now, one thing to recognize is I did tell him that I'm good with left and right-handed and other things in life, and I think that's a big factor into being able to switch to left to right quickly. I just thought it would be thousands of shots before I was comfortable rather than hundreds. Question number 2. Dr. Gman has a great video, I'll link it below, on eye dominance and how to test for eye dominance. But in that video, he opened my eyes, terrible metaphor, but he showed me that there's different types of eye dominance. There's 3 types of eye dominance. And so I was curious if one of those types of eye dominance is more important for archery. So if you have mixed eye dominance, which eye dominance is most important for archery or aiming sports?
Now, when we're talking about different types of dominant eyes, we're kind of breaking it down into 3 categories. There is a motor dominant eye, where one eye might do better at changing fixation or keeping fixation on a target, whether you're looking at a distance target and then you have to switch to a near target, or watching your distance target get closer to you, or crossing your field of vision. There's usually an eye that does better at changing fixation or remaining on target. That's your motor dominant eye. Then you have a sight dominant eye, where you have one eye that does better at acquiring the target or that initial fixation on the target. That's your sight dominant eye. Then there's sensory dominance, where you might have one eye that has better visual acuity, better vision than the other eye. Now, usually when you have a dominant eye, they have all these 3 dominances that are in that eye, but sometimes people have mixed dominances, and the common ones are sensory and sight dominance, where that's could be mixed. Super common for patients to come in and we're going to check for eye dominance, and we find out, hey, your worst vision eye or worst prescription eye is actually your dominant eye. And when we're talking about that, that's the sight acquiring eye. So usually when we're talking about sighting sports, we want to lock onto your sight dominant eye. Unless that eye ends up being really blurry, has really bad vision, then obviously we'll kind of want to go over to the better sensory dominance eye. But usually that's not the case. But sight dominance in this type of scenario is what you want to go with. And the other doctors that I asked as well, they also agreed with that. Is usually when you're talking about sighting sports, you want to go with the sight dominant eye.
You know, I had no idea that one eye could be more blurry. You see more blurry out of one eye, but that eye also could be your sighting dominant eye. So you're using your more blurry eye and you'll be better than your clearer eye if you're mixed eye dominance.
Question number 3, if your eye dominance is different from your hand dominance, which one should you choose for archery? Now, this is called cross dominance, when they're kind of opposite from each other. Now, when I was reading research and papers on this specific topic, the thing that surprised me is that a lot of these research was showing that 1 in 4 people, so 25%, actually have cross dominance. I thought it was going to be less than that. But yeah, some show that 1 in 4 people are dealing with this cross dominance. Now, in the other research, I was so curious about this topic that I actually kind of started looking to the research and papers and studies and tests and what they've done. And in the research, I would say globally, most of them ruled on the side of eye dominance being the more important. So if you're just starting out with archery, you should definitely try starting off with using your dominant eye and training your hands, training your muscles and fine motor skills to match up with your dominant eye. Now, in all the papers, they also said it really does depend on the person, though. There are other things to consider, a lot of technique and fine motor skills, and really can differ from person to person. But if you were to talk to someone just starting archery, I would say, hey, let's figure out which one your dominant eye is, and I would start there. Now, when I asked the other doctors this, some of them actually said that they would pick maybe hand dominance. And we kind of got into this discussion that maybe it might depend on the person, and if that person, whichever is the stronger dominance, meaning if their hand dominance is really strong and it's going to overpower any kind of eye dominance they have, you might want to start with that. If your eye dominance is really strong, going to be really, really hard to switch eye dominance or switch to the other eye, and so you'd start with that. But I'd say the overall picture, eye dominance would be the more important one, and that's what I would start with. Try it, try and train with it, kind of like what you're doing right now. Just kind of see what happens if you do it. Now, when I was reading these papers, an interesting part was they kind of tested electrical signal and response time, and they found in that dominant eye, the response time was actually 14 milliseconds faster than the other eye. And then they think that's why things are a little bit hardwired to that dominant eye. It's really hard to switch that over into a non-dominant eye, trying to get a faster response or a faster signal to the brain that goes to the rest of the body. And so that might be part of why training or starting with your sighting with your dominant eye and training your hands might be the more important way to go, but definitely depends on the person.
Now it's time for the segment of Actionable Steps by Kramer Ammons. Now, I do not feel like I have to recap much because Dr. Gman covered that so well. But if this were a research paper, here are my cliff notes. For me, eye dominance has always been an afterthought, but after all of my testing, I realized it should have been my first thought. 25% of people are cross-dominant. So there's a 1 in 4 chance that you're dealing with this too. If you're new to archery, it sounds like going with your eye dominance is going to be the best option. If you're mixed eye dominance, use your sight eye dominance rather than your sensory eye dominance. If you're like me and have been shooting with your dominant hand but not your dominant eye, I think you must consider switching. If it feels fairly natural to eat or to brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand, then switching how you shoot may be worth your time. But also consider the strength of your eye dominance. For me, my left eye is motor, sensory, and sighting dominant, so it's a no-brainer to switch. If your eyes are constantly causing you to see crossed when you're shooting, it may be a good idea to switch. That was the biggest noticeable difference for me when I switched, is I quit having that crossed vision and I started shooting darts. You could do a test like me. Buy a $100 bow. And as a matter of fact, I didn't even have a tab for this bow. I took a right-handed split finger tab, I put the shot cord in backwards, and I held the tab backwards. It wasn't super comfortable, but a decent short-term solution. And I used that split finger tab as a 3-under tab, and it worked out good enough for me to realize that I want to stick to left-handed. Or you could also just go to a local archery shop and test out some bows opposite of what you've been shooting and just see how it feels. That may not be as good a solution unless you do it frequently, because I really do think if you're gonna try to switch, it was around that 300 to 500 shot mark. Well, that's a lie. For me, it was about 150 to 200 shots, I started feeling really good. But I'd recommend to give it a good shot. Don't take 2 shots and say, oh, that's uncomfortable. Dr. Gman said
they kind of tested electrical signal and response time, and they found in that dominant eye, the response time was actually 14 milliseconds faster than the other eye.
So this prompted me to do some of my own research. And this is what I discovered. From eye to brain, it's about 40 milliseconds to 20 milliseconds of response time. But from brain to muscle, we have 100 to 200 milliseconds of response time. So when you do a little bit of math, on the low end you have 120 seconds, 120 milliseconds rather, of response time, and on the high end you have 240 milliseconds of response time. So a 14 millisecond decrease is 11.6 to 5.8% increase in your response time by using your dominant eye. This seems unbelievably important to me, because if your arrow is 1 degree off your target at 20 yards, you miss the target by more than a foot. I don't know what this faster reaction time translates to how far off your arrow is, but what I do know is that when I switched from my non-dominant to dominant eye, it felt easier to hit the bullseye, and I wonder if this reaction time has something to do with it. With all that said, don't fix what's broken. If what you're doing is helping you accomplish your goals, don't switch. But if you are like me, there's one question that can help determine what your next step should be. Do you feel like by not shooting with your dominant eye, you are holding yourself back? I did, and that's why I switched. Have a great day. Kramer Ammons, out.